So sometimes the mind needs moistening, having become uninspired. And recently I've had a few weeks of feeling dry, I think, because of being so narrowly focused on the nitty-gritty of what I've been doing, that I kind of lost the reason of the why and the how. And so following on from yesterday's beautiful Sharing the Dhamma Day talk about sources of inspiration, I wanted to share a few poems from this book that has brought a great deal of inspiration for me recently, called The First Free Women, Poems of the Early Buddhist Nuns. And this is a new translation of the Therigatha. And it's not a literal translation, but it's a translation by a practitioner who was worked closely with some of the Theravada nuns we know quite closely from Aloka Vihara. And it's just stunning. And what has been so powerful for me is that this is my experience. The philosophical studies that we do provide a beautiful framework for how reality really is. And then we have all these other presentations of the intimate mechanics of the mind. And then we have to bring these to life and make it personal and relate it to our own lived experience. And I do this somewhat through the Lamrim meditation and the different topics. But I find it so powerful to have these more artistic, creative pieces of work that really cut through and pierce my heart. And what's been amazing is that these writings of these women from over 2,600 years ago express my own experience with such candor and vividness that it reminded me of the why. Why I practiced the path the Buddha taught, why I'm no longer interested in the many things that I was taught was the path to happiness, why I left my husband, family, country, and home to enter into the homeless life, to be a monastic, so that I could really give myself to this practice with the hope of it bearing some fruit. So I wanted to share my inspiration with the hope that it may inspire something in you and connect you back to your why. So the first poem is by Chapa, which means the archer. Love is like all things. One night it's knocking at your front door. The next morning it's waving you goodbye. My sisters, the thing that breaks and leaves sharp edges and cuts you from the inside, that's not the heart. That's the house you built out of all the pretty things that other people told you. And the strange promise that is what is felt today will still be felt tomorrow. But such houses are built to fall apart. And when they do, the heart must take the open road and leave the past behind. At first, I thought I couldn't live without him. Then I realized there are certain things that for a long time I had been unwilling to admit, even to myself. Look me in the eye, my sister. You are more than your laughter and your sighs. You are more than your rage and your tears. You are much more than your body. And these poems just trigger such deep memories for me about turning points where I decided to practice more purely. And what came to mind with this poem was, where I saw the house was falling down. It had been falling down for a long time, but I saw that the house was falling down. And this was after a series of significant events for a 22-year-old, I think, when my husband had been diagnosed with a serious heart disease that prevented him from being able to work. So I couldn't go back to school and pursue the career I'd been hoping for. I had to go and find some money. But I couldn't find a job because my undergraduate degree was kind of worthless in a university town and everyone else was more qualified. And so I ended up working in a cafe. And my family at that time encouraged me to pursue this as a career because I enjoyed cooking. But after a few months of that, I had hit the wall. And late one afternoon, after a long 8-hour day at the cafe, my husband and I, my best friend at the time, were sitting at a bar across the road, I think hoping just to decompress and come together and be joyful. And I was just beside myself. I'd hit the wall. I was just like, what am I doing with my life? I have such a comfortable life. I'm surrounded by such kind people. But what is the point of all of this? And I remember clearly the confused and fearful faces of my partner and my friend as I just wept with sadness at feeling so lost, so fed up with pursuing happiness and not finding it. Of course, finding those fleeting moments of pleasure, happiness, connection, but nothing long-lasting. Things kept breaking, leaving sharp edges that cut me from the inside because the house that I had been told would bring me happiness, education, a long-term partner, wealth, resources, it wasn't enough to fill the hole. So I wanted something bigger than myself, bigger than the small circle of friends, and bigger than just this life. So that leads me to the next poem, where Sundarananda, I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, which means the joy of beauty, raises a question of how we use this precious human life and what is meaningful to us. And she says, "One morning after another long night, I was squatting on the toilet watching it all come out. For the first time, I saw my body, not just how it looks, but what it does, turning what is dear into what is waste. I got up and started walking. As the sun was setting, I passed a graveyard. You, my sisters beneath the leaves, as I am, so you once were. As you are, so I will become. There I slept. And there I stayed, examining this mass of flesh and bones, contemplating the many masses of flesh and bones gently rotting beneath the ground. Then one morning I saw what comes in must come out, not just the body, but the mind. What will you bring into the world other than what gets washed down the toilet?" Then reflecting on meaning and purpose in life, so much is centered around relationships. So then to share a poem by Bada Kapalani. After our wedding, my husband and I put on robes together and soon went our separate ways. Not exactly what most would call a honeymoon. Is this what love looks like? Maybe when you see what love is and what it isn't. Marriage is hard, the good times come and go. True love doesn't throw a curtain over the whole world and imprison whoever it cares about the most on an empty stage. When the mind is free, it's free of expecting more than is reasonable from just one person. So in a recent retreat, one of our Zoom discussion groups focused on the meaning of love, how we've been raised to think about love, what it means to love someone. And a few of us in the group that I was in had the shared experience that love means expectations and it means control. We're in love, so that means I can expect certain things of you, one of which is that you will treat me in this way but not that way, and that you'll do this thing for me but not that, and so forth. There can be so many strings attached to the phrase, I love you, especially in intimate relationships. And this image of throwing a curtain over the whole world and imprisoning the one you love embodies the suffocating restrictions that I imposed on my partners and that they imposed on me in this dance of being together. This possessiveness of being tethered to just one person, the unrealistic expectation that they will fill certain needs in me and be a source of my ongoing happiness. I see how naive that is now, and that not all relationships are necessarily like that. But mine were, and from what people shared in that group, others were too. And it's so interesting to ask, what can we expect from one sentient being who has so little or no control over their own mind and is pushed around by their ignorance, attachment, anger? What can they really be able to give another sentient being in exactly the same position? It feels like the blind leading the blind. And it's with these recognitions that are uncomfortable because they are completely against the grain of what society sells us as the good life, as the path to happiness. It's through these recognitions that the call to enter into the homeless life and being a monastic really took hold in me. And so in closing, I'll share the poem of Sumedha, who so beautifully captures this sentiment, the recognition of the dissatisfaction I think many of us feel with worldly life, while at the same time pointing to our potential, encouraging us to be courageous, to make those decisions, to pursue what we know to be true, and what is the most meaningful way to use our precious human life. I was wearing a new white dress on the morning I first heard the Dharma. Something was calling, but I couldn't quite make it out. I started spending more and more time alone in my room. One morning over breakfast, my mother asked me what was going on, so I told her. The Buddhist path isn't easy to follow, my mother said, especially for someone accustomed to getting whatever she wants. Marry the good king Anikadatta. Enjoy all the things young ladies enjoy, dressing up, being waited on, and going to expensive parties like weddings. Today you want to dress up this body and sell it at a wedding, I said, but soon enough they'll be selling it to the graveyard for nothing. We are cows chasing the axe. We are soft flesh chasing the cobra's fangs. We are dry straw chasing the torch. We are lovers chasing our own reflections. Mother, we are walking food. The vultures circle, we lie down, and the feast begins. My parents watched as I took a long, sharp knife and cut off my long, black hair. Just then, King Anikadatta walked in. He looked at me, blade in one hand, a couple of feet of hair in the other. Then he smiled. With your hair cut short, Sumeda, you look even more beautiful. Soon all the women in our kingdom will be cutting the hair just like yours. Come, my love, the whole world is chasing happiness. You and I will be among the lucky few who win the race. Good king, I said, if we spend our lives running after the things of the world, we will die and keep right on running. Stealing the things we mean to earn, setting fire to the things we mean to protect, drowning the people we mean to love, and turning into enemies those most like ourselves. I threw my hair to the ground. Anikadatta knelt down, picked up a few strands, and then let them fall. Then he stood and turned to my parents. You who would have been my mother, you who would have been my father, let Sumeda go. May she find the path, and may she one day return to show us all the way home. It's getting dark now, my sisters. The sun's going down, and soon we'll all be going our separate ways. Can we sit here together just a little while longer, not saying anything at all? The path will go on, rising and falling like a song. And in the end, you will find yourself as one lost at sea finds herself finally washed ashore. Listen, can you hear that? The sound of the wind in the leaves like a wave coming on. Go on, shake up the world, set yourself free.